The mahogany walls of Courtroom 7 had absorbed 30 years of testimony, but nothing quite prepared them for the arrogance that walked through those doors on that autumn morning. If you believe that justice should be blind to wealth and power, hit that like button right now. The air hung thick with tension as Deputy Marshal Henderson opened the heavy oak doors at precisely 9:47 a.m. Every head in the gallery turned toward the sound of expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. Tyler Ashford Bennington III entered the courtroom like he was attending a country club brunch rather than facing charges of vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident. His designer suit probably cost more than most people in that room made in 3 months. His hair was perfectly styled, his smile was dismissive, and his eyes swept across the assembled crowd with the kind of contempt that comes from never hearing the word no in your entire life. Behind him walked his father's high-powered legal team, led by Marcus Rothwell, an attorney whose reputation for getting wealthy clients acquitted was matched only by his $600 an hour fee. They moved like sharks in tailored suits, briefcases clicking open and shut with practiced precision. In the second row of the gallery sat Governor Richard Bennington himself, his presence designed to intimidate, his expression carefully neutral but his message crystal clear. My son is untouchable. On the opposite side of the courtroom sat Margaret Chen, a 63-year-old woman whose hands hadn't stopped trembling since the night 3 months ago when her daughter Emma never came home. Emma had been 28 years old, a pediatric nurse who volunteered at homeless shelters on weekends, who called her mother every single day, whose laugh could light up a room. Now she existed only in photographs and memories, her life cut short on a rain-slicked road by a drunk driver who fled the scene and left her dying in the darkness. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of the assembled crowd. All rise, the Honorable Judge Elias Monroe presiding. The room stood as one, the shuffling of feet and rustling of fabric creating a wave of sound that quickly died into absolute silence. Judge Elias Monroe entered from his chambers with the deliberate pace of a man who understood that justice could not be rushed. At 64 years old, he carried himself with a dignity that seemed to belong to another era. His gray hair was neatly trimmed, his black robes immaculate, but it was his eyes that commanded attention. Dark, penetrating, and utterly unwilling to be intimidated by any amount of money or influence. He took his seat behind the bench, surveying the courtroom with the calm assessment of someone who had seen every variation of human behavior and remained unimpressed by performances. His gaze lingered for just a moment on Tyler Bennington, who met it with a smirk that would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. "Be seated," Judge Monroe said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made even the suggestion of disobedience seem impossible. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Winters stood before the jury with the confidence of someone who had truth on her side. She was 36 years old, brilliant, and absolutely relentless when it came to holding the powerful accountable. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and clear. "On the evening of July 15th, Emma Chen left her shift at St. Augustine's Hospital at 11:30 p.m. She stopped at a grocery store to pick up ingredients for her mother's birthday dinner the next day. Security footage shows her leaving that store at 11:52 p.m. with a smile on her face, carrying bags of groceries, looking forward to celebrating with her family. She would never make it home. The courtroom was absolutely silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming, could hear someone in the back row trying to suppress a cough. At approximately 12:17 a.m., at the intersection of Riverside Drive and Oak Street, Emma Chen's vehicle was struck by a 2023 Mercedes G-Wagon traveling at an estimated 73 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone. The impact was catastrophic. Emma's car spun 3 times before colliding with a utility pole. The Mercedes never even slowed down. Ada Winters turned to face Tyler Bennington directly. He was examining his fingernails, a deliberate display of disinterest that made Margaret Chen choke back a sob. The driver of that Mercedes was the defendant, Tyler Bennington. He had been at the Celestial Lounge until 11:45 p.m., where he consumed, by witness accounts, at least 8 shots of tequila and multiple cocktails. He was celebrating, he told the bartender, his father's latest political victory. When he left that bar, he was stumbling. The valet noticed. The security guard noticed. A dozen people noticed, but nobody stopped him because... She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. because he's the governor's son. The defense immediately objected, claiming prejudicial statements, but Judge Monroe overruled with a single gesture, his expression indicating that the truth, however uncomfortable, would not be silenced in his courtroom. Emma Chen died at the scene, ADA Winters continued, her voice thick with emotion she was struggling to contain. She was trapped in her vehicle for 47 minutes while emergency responders worked to free her. She was conscious for some of that time. She called for her mother. She died alone, on a dark road, because the man who hit her didn't even have the decency to stop. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Traffic camera footage showed the Mercedes running a red light at excessive speed. Paint transfer analysis proved the vehicles had made contact. The Mercedes was found the next morning in the defendant's garage. Front end damaged, headlight shattered, a small piece of Emma Chen's jacket still caught in the grille. But it was the testimony of Officer Daniel Reeves that began to crack the defense's carefully constructed wall of denial. Officer Reeves was a 15-year veteran of the Highway Patrol, a man with a reputation for integrity that was beyond question. "I received a call at 12:43 a.m., Officer Reeves testified, his voice professional but strained. Anonymous tip about a damaged Mercedes G-Wagon heading toward the Bennington estate. I was 3 blocks away, so I responded immediately. I spotted the vehicle turning into the private drive at 12:51 a.m. The front end was severely damaged, steam rising from the hood, and there was what appeared to be blood spatter on the windshield. "What happened when you attempted to stop the vehicle?" Ada Winters asked. "I activated my lights and siren. The vehicle stopped in the circular driveway. The defendant exited the vehicle, and I could immediately smell alcohol. His eyes were bloodshot. His speech was slurred, and he was unsteady on his feet. What did he say to you?" Officer Reeves took a deep breath. He said, and I quote, "Do you know who my father is? You just ended your career." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Monroe's gaze never wavered from the witness stand. "Did you attempt to administer a field sobriety test?" "I did. Before I could complete it, 3 vehicles arrived. Private security, the family attorney, and approximately 10 minutes later, a man identifying himself as the governor's chief of staff. They surrounded us. The chief of staff told me that this was a misunderstanding and that the vehicle damage was from earlier in the evening, unrelated to any accident." "What was the defendant doing during this time?" "Smirking. He stood there, swaying slightly, smirking at me while these people tried to make me go away." "But you didn't go away." "No, ma'am. I arrested him on suspicion of DUI. It took backup and a direct order from my captain, but I arrested him. By the time we got him to the station for a blood draw, it was nearly 2 hours after the initial stop. His blood alcohol content was still 11, well above the legal limit. 2 hours after the accident, after his body had metabolized a significant amount of alcohol, he was still legally drunk." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Monroe's gavel came down once, and silence returned instantly. Tyler's defense attorney, Marcus Rothwell, approached the cross-examination like a predator circling wounded prey. "Officer Reeves, isn't it true that you were passed over for promotion last year?" "Objection, relevance," ADA Winters called out. "Your Honor, I'm establishing potential bias." "I'll allow it, but get to your point, Mr. Rothwell," Judge Monroe said, his tone suggesting his patience had limits. "I was passed over, yes," Officer Reeves admitted. "And isn't it true that Governor Bennington was on the committee that reviewed promotional candidates for state law enforcement positions?" "He was." "So you have a grudge against my client's father, and by extension, my client." Officer Reeves leaned forward, his jaw tight. "I have a grudge against drunk drivers who kill innocent people and think they can buy their way out of consequences. If that applies to your client, then yes, I suppose I do." The gallery actually applauded. Judge Monroe's gavel came down harder this time. "Order. I will have order in this courtroom." The medical examiner's testimony was clinical but devastating. Emma Chen had died from massive internal injuries. She had survived the initial impact, but succumbed while trapped in her vehicle. If emergency services had been called immediately, if the driver had stopped, if someone had rendered aid, she might have survived. That 15-minute window between the accident and the anonymous call to 911, those 15 minutes that Tyler Bennington spent fleeing the scene, had been the difference between life and death. Margaret Chen's victim impact statement broke every heart in that courtroom. She stood at the witness stand, a small woman who seemed to have aged a decade in 3 months. and spoke about her daughter with a love that transcended grief. "Emma was my only child," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying to every corner of the room. "Her father died when she was 7, and it was just the two of us against the world. She was so good, so kind. She became a nurse because she wanted to help people. She volunteered at the homeless shelter because she said everyone deserved dignity. She called me every single day, sometimes twice a day, just to check on me." Margaret's hands gripped the wooden rail of the witness stand. "The last thing she texted me was a picture of a bunch of tulips she saw outside the grocery store. Tulips are my favorite. She sent me a picture and said, 'Saw these and thought of you, Mom. Can't wait for tomorrow.' Tomorrow was my birthday. She was bringing ingredients to make my favorite meal. She never made it home." Tyler Bennington yawned. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate, theatrical yawn accompanied by a stretch, as if this woman's grief was boring him. Margaret Chen saw it. Everyone saw it. The gasp that went through the courtroom was audible. Ada Winters actually took a step back, her expression one of genuine shock. Even Marcus Rothwell looked uncomfortable, shooting his client a warning glare that was completely ignored. Judge Monroe's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went absolutely cold. Margaret Chen stared at Tyler Bennington, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter died alone in the dark, calling for me, and you can't even pretend to care for 5 minutes." "Mrs. Chen," Judge Monroe said gently, "please continue." She turned back to the judge, wiping her eyes. "I don't know how to live in a world without her. I don't know how to wake up knowing I'll never hear her voice again. Every morning I forget for just a second, and then I remember, and it breaks me all over again. The man who did this to her, who took her from me, he's sitting right there acting like this is all some inconvenience. I'm asking you, Your Honor, please don't let him get away with this. Please let Emma's death mean something." The defense's strategy became clear during Tyler's testimony. They weren't denying he'd been drinking. They weren't denying he'd been driving. They were creating an elaborate alternative narrative where Tyler was somehow the victim of overzealous prosecution motivated by political bias against his father. Tyler took the stand with the confidence of someone who had been assured by expensive lawyers that his money could purchase any outcome. He wore a blue suit that some consultant had probably told him made him look trustworthy. It didn't work. Everything about him screamed entitlement. "Mr. Bennington," Marcus Rothwell began, his voice smooth as silk, "can you tell us about the evening of July 15th? "Sure. I was having a few drinks with friends at the Celestial Lounge. We were celebrating my father's infrastructure bill passing. It was a big win for the state." "How many drinks did you have?" "Maybe 3 or 4. I wasn't keeping count. I wasn't drunk." "Did you drive your vehicle that evening?" "Yes, I did drive, but I was completely fine. I've driven in much worse condition than that." The words were out of his mouth before he realized how they sounded. Marcus Rothwell closed his eyes briefly, and you could almost see him calculating how to recover from that admission. "What I mean," Tyler said, smirking at his own gaffe, "is that I had my full faculties. I knew exactly what I was doing." Ada Winters' cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Bennington, you stated you had 3 or 4 drinks. The bartender testified you had at least 8 shots of tequila plus multiple mixed drinks. Was the bartender lying?" "He must have been confused. It was busy." 3 witnesses testified to the same number. Were they all confused?" "I guess they were." "Or were you so drunk you can't actually remember how much you drank?" "Objection." "Argumentative," Rothwell called out. "Sustained," Judge Monroe said, but his eyes remained fixed on Tyler. "Let's talk about the accident itself," Ada Winters continued. "You were traveling down Riverside Drive around 12:17 a.m. Do you remember that?" "I remember driving, yes." "Do you remember hitting another vehicle?" For the first time, Tyler hesitated. "No." "You don't remember the impact? The sound of metal crushing metal? The airbags deploying in your vehicle?" "I don't remember any accident." "How convenient." "You remember leaving the bar, you remember driving, but you conveniently don't remember the moment you killed Emma Chen." "Objection." "Withdrawn." "Mr. Bennington, when Officer Reeves stopped you at your home, why didn't you tell him about the accident if you were so certain you hadn't been involved in one?" "Because I wasn't involved in one." "So the damage to your vehicle, the paint transfer that matches Emma Chen's car, the piece of her jacket caught in your grill, how do you explain that?" "I don't know. Maybe someone tampered with my car." The absurdity of the statement hung in the air. 80 Winters let it sit there for a long moment, letting the jury absorb just how desperate and ridiculous the defense had become. Someone broke into the governor's secured estate, took your Mercedes, drove it into another car, killed someone, brought it back and planted evidence. That's your testimony? It's possible. Mr. Bennington, did you ever try to find out what happened to the person in the other vehicle? What do you mean? After your arrest, after you learned there had been a fatal accident on the route you drove that night, did you ever ask if the victim had family? Did you ever express remorse? Did you ever even ask what her name was? Tyler shrugged. That wasn't my responsibility. The courtroom exploded. Judge Monroe's gavel came down like thunder. Order. I will clear this courtroom if necessary. But the damage was done. Tyler Bennington had just revealed exactly who he was. Someone so devoid of empathy, so insulated by privilege, that the death of another human being didn't even register as his responsibility to acknowledge. Ada Winters returned to her table, her expression one of grim satisfaction. No further questions, Your Honor. The moment that would define the entire trial came during the defense's closing arguments. Marcus Rothwell was making an impassioned speech about reasonable doubt, about the prosecution's supposedly flimsy timeline, about how a young man's entire future shouldn't be destroyed by circumstantial evidence. Tyler Bennington, apparently bored with his own defense, leaned back in his chair and muttered to his lawyer, but the courtroom had gone so quiet that his voice carried, "This is such bullshit. My father's going to have Monroe removed from the bench after this circus. He owns this court." It was as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Marcus Rothwell went pale. He grabbed Tyler's arm, trying to silence him, but the words were already out there, hanging in the air like toxic smoke. Judge Monroe slowly turned his head toward the defense table. The movement was deliberate, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its restraint. "Mr.
Bennington," Judge Monroe said, his voice so quiet that people in the back row leaned forward to hear. "Would you care to repeat that statement?" Tyler, incredibly, either didn't sense the danger or didn't care. He stood up, his posture aggressive, his expression defiant. "You heard me. My father owns this court, owns you. This whole trial is a joke. You think you're going to do something to me? You think your little speech about justice is going to change anything? I'll walk out of here, and in 6 months, everyone will forget this even happened." Marcus Rothwell was frantically trying to pull his client back down into his seat, but Tyler shook him off. "You know what the real crime is?" Tyler continued, his voice rising. "The real crime is that I have to sit here and listen to some dead nurse's mother cry about her precious daughter. People die every day. It's not my fault she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's sure as hell not worth destroying my future over." The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret Chen sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. The jury looked stunned, as if they couldn't quite believe what they were witnessing. Governor Bennington stood up from his seat in the gallery, his face a mask of barely controlled fury, not at his son's words, but at his son's stupidity in saying them out loud. Judge Monroe stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Bennington, you have just given me a remarkable gift. You have removed any doubt about who you are, what you believe, and what you value. You have shown this court, this jury, and everyone present that you believe yourself to be above the law, above accountability, above basic human decency. Your Honor," Marcus Rothwell tried to interrupt, "Your client is obviously exactly what he appears to be." Judge Monroe cut him off. "Counselor, sit down. Your client wanted to speak. Let him face the consequences of his words." Judge Monroe's gaze never left Tyler. "You stand there in your expensive suit, surrounded by lawyers your father's money has purchased, and you mock a grieving mother. You mock the life of a young woman who dedicated herself to helping others. You mock this court and the very concept of justice. You believe your father's position grants you immunity from the basic rules that govern civilized society." Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but Judge Monroe held up one hand. "You are wrong. Your father does not own this court. Your family's money does not own this court. Your sense of privilege and entitlement does not own this court. This court belongs to the people, to the principles of justice, and to the belief that no one, regardless of their name, their wealth, or their connections, is above the law." The judge turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the evidence. You have seen the defendant's character displayed with remarkable clarity. I will now give you instructions on the law,
and you will retire to deliberate. But I want you to remember something. Emma Chen cannot speak for herself anymore. Her voice has been silenced. You are her voice now. You are Justice's voice now. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, their expressions were resolute. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Monroe asked. The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the count of vehicular manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of driving under the influence, we find the defendant guilty. Tyler Bennington's face went white. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in his eyes. The sentencing hearing was held 1 week later. The courtroom was even more packed than before, with news crews lined up outside, and the story having become a national symbol of whether justice could truly be blind to wealth and power. Judge Monroe entered, took his seat, and surveyed the courtroom with those penetrating eyes that had seen through Tyler Bennington from the very first moment. Mr. Bennington, please stand. Tyler stood, flanked by his lawyers. His arrogance had been replaced by something closer to panic, but even now, you could see him glancing at his father, as if expecting some last-minute intervention. Mr. Bennington, this court has presided over many cases, many tragedies, many moments where human beings have failed each other in profound ways. But rarely have I encountered someone who so thoroughly embodies the corruption of privilege, the corrosion of character that comes from never being told no, never facing consequences, never being required to consider anyone beyond yourself. Judge Monroe opened the file before him. Emma Chen was 28 years old. She was a pediatric nurse. She volunteered with homeless populations. By every account, she was a person of exceptional kindness and character. You took her life because you believed your desire to drive drunk was more important than her right to live. Then you fled, leaving her to die alone. When confronted with your actions, you showed no remorse, no empathy, no humanity. Your Honor, Marcus Rothwell began, I have letters here from numerous character witnesses. I've read them, Mr. Rothwell. They describe a young man who is charming to his peers, generous to his friends, and well-liked in his social circle. They describe the Tyler Bennington that exists when circumstances suit him. They do not describe the Tyler Bennington who killed Emma Chen and then mocked her grieving mother in open court. Judge Monroe leaned forward. You stood in this courtroom and declared that I am owned by your father, that this court is owned by your family, that justice is something that can be purchased or circumvented through connections. You could not have been more wrong. The maximum sentence for vehicular manslaughter in this jurisdiction is 15 years. The maximum for leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death is 10 years. The maximum for driving under the influence with prior offenses. And yes, Mr. Bennington, we discovered you've had 2 previous DUIs that your father's lawyers managed to seal, is 5 years. Tyler's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, we request these sentences run concurrently. They will not. Mr. Bennington, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years for vehicular manslaughter, 10 years for leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death, and 5 years for driving under the influence. These sentences will run consecutively. You will serve 30 years in state prison. The courtroom erupted. Governor Bennington shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. Tyler Bennington simply collapsed into his chair, the reality finally breaking through his fortress of privilege. Judge Monroe wasn't finished. Furthermore, upon your release, you will serve an additional 10 years of supervised probation. Your driver's license is revoked permanently. You will be required to complete substance abuse treatment, and you will be required to speak annually at high schools about the consequences of drunk driving, where you will tell Emma Chen's story and acknowledge what you took from this world. Your Honor, this is excessive, Marcus Rothwell was almost shouting. We will appeal immediately. You have that right, Mr. Rothwell. But I have presided over this bench for 31 years, and I have carefully considered every aspect of sentencing guidelines and precedent. This sentence is both legally sound and morally necessary. Judge Monroe turned his attention to Tyler one final time. Mr. Bennington, you came into this courtroom believing you were untouchable. You leave it with the understanding that justice, real justice, does not recognize bloodlines or bank accounts. Emma Chen's life had value. Your belief that it didn't, your mockery of her mother's grief, your complete absence of remorse. These things have consequences. He raised his gavel. This court is adjourned. The sound of that gavel coming down seemed to echo forever. Margaret Chen wept, but this time they were tears of something other than pure grief. They were tears of acknowledgement, of validation, of a system that had actually, against all odds, worked. Ada Winters embraced her, and the two women stood together while Deputy Marshal Henderson placed handcuffs on Tyler Bennington and led him away. Tyler looked back at his father one last time, perhaps expecting some rescue that would never come. Governor Bennington sat frozen in his seat, watching his son's future collapse, realizing that for once, his power had met its limit. In the hallway outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, but Margaret Chen made one brief statement. My daughter believed in justice. She believed in fairness. Today, Judge Monroe honored her memory by showing that those principles still mean something. Emma would want everyone to know that no one is above the law. The story became national news, a symbol of a justice system that could still function as intended, a reminder that character matters, that actions have consequences, and that all the money and power in the world cannot purchase immunity from basic human decency and accountability. Judge Elias Monroe continued his work, presiding over cases with the same quiet dignity and unshakable ethics that had defined his career. He never gave interviews about the Bennington case, never sought publicity, never treated it as anything other than what it was, a tragedy where justice had to be served, regardless of who it made uncomfortable. Tyler Bennington began serving his sentence at a state facility 300 miles from his family's estate. Reports from prison staff indicated he spent his first few months in shock, struggling to comprehend that his surname and his father's position couldn't alter his circumstances. But time, it's said, can be a powerful teacher, even for those who believe themselves unteachable. Emma Chen's name lived on through a scholarship fund established for nursing students who demonstrated not just academic excellence, but genuine compassion and commitment to serving underserved populations. Margaret Chen spent the rest of her life ensuring that her daughter's legacy was one of kindness, not just tragedy. And the words, "My father owns this court," became a cautionary tale, a reminder that arrogance and entitlement can only shield someone from consequences for so long, that justice, when wielded by those with the courage and integrity to uphold it, can still prevail against even the most powerful forces of privilege and corruption. The truth that echoed through Courtroom 7 that day was simple but profound. In a truly just society, everyone stands equal before the law, and those who believe otherwise will eventually face a reckoning that no amount of money, influence, or family name can prevent. This is what happens when privilege meets principle, when arrogance encounters accountability, and when someone finally tells the powerful what they need to hear instead of what they want to hear. You are not above the law, you are not beyond consequences, and you are not more valuable than the lives you damage or destroy. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that justice should be truly blind to wealth and privilege, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We share stories that matter, stories about accountability, about courage, and about those rare moments when the system actually works the way it's supposed to. Drop a comment saying justice for all, or let us know where you're watching from. These stories need to be told. These principles need to be defended. And together, we can keep the conversation going about what real justice looks like in action.